There's a few additional rendering advice things you want to bring up here. Again, these are in-depth tips and tricks. Some of them are very small, some of them are kind of fun, some of them are really important. So it's just a bit of a mix of things I felt we should mention that weren't maybe covered earlier. A couple of different things here. We've got the managing triangles and draw calls. So statistics panel is a really important tool. So a lot of people, I feel, kind of forget about it, but it's a really important tool to get an overview and a feeling of exactly what is in the environment. Right, and this was also shown in the world building one again, so I'm not going to get too deep into this one, but again, statistics over here, this panel here is absolutely fantastic. You can merge meshes. There is a built-in tool to merge actors in Unreal. So if the draw calls or for whatever other reason you want to combine models, that is built in, that is available. You can take any couple of static meshes in here. Let me turn on the shadows, which we disabled in the previous section, just to bring that back into line. You can take any model you wish, right click, and you can actually do merge actors somewhere in here, which there we are. Merge actors, and you can merge it in 3 different ways. You can do the first one, which is just merge as is, just make one static mesh actor out of these things. If there's different materials, there'll just be different materials in there as well. It can create a proxy, which is also gonna combine the. Actually, you can merge materials with the first one, if you would wish to. But the proxy goes a step further. It will merge the materials by creating a new texture, which is just, it merged everything from both textures or whatever textures together. And it's also going to cut the meshes up. So if the meshes are intersecting, it's going to weld the meshes together. So it tries to reduce polygon count. It's more suitable for distant geometry because it's a bit imprecise. This is what the H-slot meshes are using. And then there is converted to an instant static mesh component as seen earlier. So you can also just convert stuff that you already have to that one. In general, there's a whole lot to say about hitting the right balance. I mean, I did a while back, I did a rendering masterclass. I believe it's still on the Unreal Learning website. So that one goes further into that, but you want to find a balance between, merging too many meshes, not merging too many meshes. We typically start with a lot of separate, smaller meshes and then evaluate as we go along. But there's a lot to say about that. That goes beyond quick advice. You can force, again, as mentioned in the previous section of this class, you can always force lot meshes. You can always say that if you got a mesh, for example, the statue here has a lot, you can force lot the model and say it should always render as the second lot. In this case, I'll put it to 2. So it's always low resolution. You can say this also should only happen on certain devices. So you can control that. And detail mode is also mentioned in world building, but quick mention there here. Detail mode, just to be aware of it. There's a nice property as well. It will remove meshes or actors that are set to high if world detail in game is set to low. It's the other way around. It's a bit confusing, but it can remove small details if you don't need them. That could be removed. I mean, it drops it a bit. So typically I set lots of small clutter and all that is only going to display in high detail. Shadow rendering, be aware of the balance between cascaded shadow maps and distant fields. Typically the cascaded shadow maps are actually ending much closer than you might initially suspect. We're talking about 3,000–4,000 units or so is typically the cutoff point, and then distant field would take over up to say 20–30,000 units. You can see how it goes by. Just be aware of the numbers. There is a feature that no one seems to use. It's still fun to use. It's called far shadows that you can experiment with. A far shadow set in a directional light allows you to set a second set of cascaded shadow maps, but only for certain models and in the far distance. So it's like a fallback, far away cascaded shadow map. You got to enable it here in the directional light, set how many cascades you want and what the distance is. And then in the models you want to include, you need to specifically manually include this pillar costs a far shadow. So it allows you to say the big building in the distance still going to cost a shadow, everything else will lose a shadow. And again, it's a little bit outdated. Distant fields took over a little bit, but it's still a fun feature and it's pretty useful. You can set a range on lights. You want to do that from time to time as well. So we go back here to the editor. I believe I did this on this slide, but probably a bit not aggressive enough. See if we can visualize that somehow. See over there, the fire inside a building, it's now disappearing. So that's a property on any light that you've got. You can always set that. Max draw distance, and it will color itself at that distance. You could also, if you want more control, make a simple blueprint, because you can make just a blueprint that checks the distance every 1 second or so, or every 2 seconds, or every slow interval between the camera and the light. And if it's further than X, disable the shadows, but only the shadows, because the shadows are the heaviest for performance. So you can also just make small blueprints that disable the lights. If, for example, the door is closed, turn off the lights with a simple blueprint script. That's very simple to do. Be aware, as in general,